Hey kids, in today's video we're going to go over a way around two of the biggest annoyances I have with the Power Platform. One, small data sets, and two, delegation. Alright, let's go check this out. Okay, so common thing I run into is, well, what happens if my data set is larger than what I've set for my minimum in Power Apps? So of course, by default, it's 500 items. You can crank it up to 2,000. And while one could argue that if your data set is more than 2,000 items, you need to work on your filters, sometimes you can't avoid that. Sometimes you need a large data set. It just happens. Like, what happens if you have a list of customers? Well, you may have 2,001 customers. It's possible. And sometimes you need to just select from them, for an example. So let's just go ahead and say that in today's video, we have a need for more than 2,000 items. So how do we get that? And another problem is, when we try and filter those down, sometimes our filters, especially on these large data sets, run into delegation. So I get it. You know, Power Apps, it's a cloud-based thing. You want to make sure that your performance is up to par in terms of having any kind of data lag. And a lot of times these large data sets just are a problem. So I don't recommend doing this for every solution, but for those instances where you need a lot of information and or need to get around delegation, this video may help. Okay, so let's take a look at what we're trying to do today. First, we'll see here I have a list. I call it many items, unique. It has 5,000 items, right? I had to get above 2,000 with a significant level. And that data is unbelievably simple. Why? Because I wrote PowerShell to fill it. Here we see we have a color, I skip birthday, doesn't really matter. Item number, letter. So single line of text, integer, single line of text. And what I want to do is be able to pull this data back as one large data set. Now, in the pro code world, back in my purely SharePoint development days, this isn't hard, right? The REST commands, calling, getting your SharePoint data was fairly straightforward. You had a lot more control, but again, you were coding these things, and so you had all the control you needed to. In the low-code world, we have to deal with that bit of a restricted world that Microsoft has presented to us. All right, so let's find, so what do we do to get around that? So the REST command is our hint. Now, if we look at our data, we have 5,000 things. How would we get that in a coded way? Well, we would send in a REST command with a top number of how many items to return and a bit of a filter applied to it in our query string. Okay, so how do we get that? As you can see here, here's kind of setting the stage for us, and then I'll go into how we get it. So here we see a delegation issue. I have a gallery. It is set to something common. The list itself, I have not pulled in a collection because for this example I don't need to. And I am filtering on a currently undelegable formula. All right, the not equal to. It's a string not equal. Now, SharePoint's delegation has gotten a lot better, but we still run into these things. Now, the not equal is easy in REST, color, any, a value, but it can't be done here on large data sets. So as you can see here, one, I have the default for my Power App set to 500, so we could see here 450 items, and it has filtered out the blue. So now how do we get more items here and still apply our not equal? So we know we have a list of 5,000 items. We know we want to filter it. The only way we're going to get a REST command, as I hinted at before, is with Flow. And that's what we're going to do today in order to get a large data set of items. Okay. This particular video was inspired by a comment from a user on my previous video where we talked about using the ParseJSON in Flow to get data from different data sources. He asked if it was possible to get around delegation and to get more items, and I thought, what a great video. Turns out his question was valid, and this is what we're going to do today. So we see the flow we have set up. Today's going to be a quick video. I'm not going to walk you through this because a lot of these particulars we went through in the last video. So the flow is going to be, we have two things we care about. We want how many items are we going to get, and what is our filter query. And that's what we have set up here in our trigger. We have number of items, it's a number, and then we have a string for a filter query. Now, of course, that can be blank, but it's still, you need a space provided. We're setting up a variable for our output, which we'll get to in a minute. And the key here is simply the send in a request to SharePoint, the get items command. So we see we've picked a site, we've picked a list, we see the many items list. We're passing in the filter query, which is our rest command, and then our top count, which is our number of items. We send that in, and again, pulling from the last video, we have a compose statement that uses the JSON function, specifically this. So we see we're going to see you have JSON, we're going to convert the output to a string, and that output is just simply the value coming from get items. So very straightforward. It's going to take the bulk result coming back from the get items command from SharePoint, turn it into a string, turn it into JSON, and we're going to send it back to Power Apps. Now, yes, we're going to get our three interesting columns, but we're also going to get everything that comes back from a normal SharePoint REST command. In our compose, of course, we did that statement. We simply set the output variable to the output to compose, and we pass that back to Power Apps. So that's the flow. Very simple. Let's look at how we work it out. So here's our delegation problem. And again, to review what it is we're going to try and do, we want to get a large number of items, and we want to delegate in this not equal. So if we go here, I have a similar gallery up, and what I've done is I've set up the gallery to say, okay, I have a text box that just holds a numeric value. That'll get us the number that we want to pull back so we can see it work. We'll have it so where we can just get a lot of items, and then we'll have it set up so where we can get the not equal items. Okay, let's take a look at how that works. In our just straight get many, we see here we start with the Power Automate call. Okay, so we are sending in, we're setting a variable just for the raw items, we're calling our flow, and we're sending in first the numeric value equivalent in the text box. So here's a number of items. And as you can see here, the second variable is the rest filter, and that's blank for this example. From there, we're going to put the items into a collection, and we're going to use our ParseJSON. So we're taking our raw items, dot items, which is the output variable from the flow, and we're going to do a ParseJSON. We're going to put it in a table. And what we see here is, again, pulling back from the previous video, we have to take the columns as they come in from the flow, pulled from the SharePoint list. We are going ahead and set their type. In this case, we have 3 single lines of text and 1 numeric value, and then we're going to build our own collection by setting these variables. So, for example, color name, because the color function is there, I don't want to confuse things. The field color name is set to the text value of the value coming from our items in flow of the color field. Okay, so we've set our collection and typed it coming back from flow. And this is the key here. Again, yes, this is still experimental, so this may change in the somewhat near future, but this is a way to simplify this return from flow. You could do it before, but you had to structure your data such where you put in delimiters and you looped through each item and set up a large string, and it was annoying. This way it simplifies life because it sends back all of the data from SharePoint and converts it neatly into JSON, something we can now digest in the Power App. So let's take a look how this works. We hit play. We see here first we have 10 items. We hit get many items. The ants will march across the top, and when this comes back, we'll have 10 items. Note, we have blue. We want that as 100 items. We're going to wait a little longer, but we get 100 items. Now, of course, pulling back large data does come with the penalty of waiting for the data, which you're going to do anyway from the straight data connection in Power Apps, But that is our cravat. And again, I get it. You may not want to do this. Probably don't. I doubt this is a best practice, but sometimes we just need this information. So I'm showing you a way to do it. So now we know from previous example on the other page, 500 is my current set. So if I want to get 1,000, get many items. We wait a little bit, again, look, 1,000 items. It's a big list, but it's all there. Now again, memory hit, potentially, performance hit, potentially, but if you need it, we now have it. And now, if we wanted to get 5,000 items, well above the maximum limit from Power Apps, we hit this with our 5,000 item limit set. We wait a little bit longer for the ants to march across the screen, and here shortly, we have 5,000 items in our gallery. Now this label down here is just simply doing a count rows on my gallery, but it shows you that we have the data. So now that we have done that, what was problem number 2? That was delegation. So let's take a look at what the get many items not equal button does. The bottom is the exact same thing, right? Our clear collect has not changed because it is simply digesting what comes back from the flow. What did change is in our run statement, and we see here up top, color not equal blue. For the SharePoint developers watching, you'll understand this as how the filter worked in SharePoint REST. Okay, you're sending in the internal name of the field, color in this case. We have our PowerShell-esque comparison value of not equal, and then the string blue. Okay, we're still sending in a bunch of requests. We see here 5,000. That hasn't changed in terms of our request. But what we can do now, and we'll just drop this back. No, we'll leave it at 5,000. Get many items not equal. So we know we're saying not equal blue. So we should see that first column disappear. We hit the button again. Flow runs to making our call back to SharePoint. And here shortly we should see a subset of data without blue. Waiting for the ants. Again, this is the trade-off. You got to wait for the data to come back from Flow and be processed. It comes back, and we see here 4,500 items, so I have a subset, and blue is gone. So we got past delegation, and we got past the large item limit by sidestepping the standard connection and using Flow. So that's it. It's a pretty quick video today. I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.